Breaking news, millennials, you might be able to buy a house.
The cozy couple is going to be the new it couple. Benny Blanco and Selena Gomez. Tom Holland and Zendaya.
That's wild. You guys predicted that there would be an assassination attempt on a world leader.
Next year is really pretty crazy. We're calling it the year of the divine pendulum. Our sex energy comes from Mars, but Venus is more the seduction part. Neptune is moving into Aries. The last time it was there was at the start of the Civil War.
I know that you guys had sort of predicting the Trump election, not that it was what you wanted, but welcome to Makeshift Happen, Tali. I'm so excited to have you. I can't wait to dive into this conversation. I know that we're going to cover so much ground. We are going to get into pop culture. We're going to get into predictions for 2025. I have your incredible book, I Know My Archetype, which I'm obsessed with, and I can't wait to hear more about how we can use this to really understand ourselves and our lives better. So I'm such a big fan of astrology. I'm not an expert by any means, but I've always been so intrigued and curious about it. I'm really, really excited to have you on the show. Welcome. I'm so curious if when you do these types of interviews, if you like to get a little sneak peek of the host's energy and try to kind of stalk their chart a little beforehand. And if so, what do you look for? What is the dirt that you found on me?
Well, we did discover that we had the same birthday, December 2nd, which is amazing. What we'd like to see, I mean, again, and everybody's got dirt, right? So, but when you do someone's chart, it just all of a sudden you get this picture of who they are, who they might be, and it starts to talk to me. I'm like, oh, okay. So we did both your traditional birth chart, which is the wheel and, your sun, moon, your big three, your rising. And then we also did the short code to astrology that we talk about in our book, The Astrology Advantage. We did what's called your I AM diagram. So what we found out from your main birth chart is we have a lot in common, actually. Our charts are primarily Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Scorpio. So we have that, what's called a stellium, when planets are all kind of packed in, a few signs or a few parts of the chart. And for you, Sagittarius, the traveler, you have your sun and Mars there. Your moon, though, is in Cancer. That's a very different vibe. So while, your sun sign in Sagittarius makes you want to go be a world traveler, explorer, media maker, the moon, so we all have a sun sign. Of course, that's the sign we know, but every other planet is in another sign in the moon. And so your moon in Cancer gives you this inner world that's a lot more empathic, home-based, family-oriented. So you probably are both a traveler and a homebody, or maybe you like to take home on the road, huh?
Yeah, weirdly enough, it's like I love to travel and I also love to be at home.
Yeah, like either those are your two favorite states. And your rising sign, which we know because we know your time of birth, is in Virgo, and that's kind of the lens you have on life, the first. So with a Virgo rising, you're investigative, journalistically curious, analytical, wellness focused. So all of this, like your worldly discoveries and the things you do at home, are kind of funneled through that rising sign, which says, well, how can I find ways to life hack and make things helpful and make things work for me in any state? That stellium, though, that you have of planets all together in those three signs gives you this sort of concentrated intensity. It's like Scorpio is this water sign that's like this detective and gets very attached to people and things. And then Sagittarius wants to be free and move around. And Capricorn likes to turn it all into a business. So
I don't think I've ever realized that I have significant placements in Capricorn.
You have Neptune and Uranus there. So two outer planets that a lot of millennials actually have. They're generational planets because they move pretty slowly. They'll spend 15 years in a sign for Neptune, 7 for Uranus, but they shape that, desire that millennials have to have this sort of success, but in a meaningful, conscious way.
Yeah, so true. I think most people, at least most people listening to this podcast, let's say, are probably familiar with their big three, their sun, moon, and rising signs. But I'm really curious about, from your perspective as someone who's, been deep in astrology for so many years, what would you say is one of the most like underrated placements to have people look at that can really tell you something meaningful about yourself?
I think the North and South nodes are the biggies. We've been talking about this for a really long time, and they've gotten more popular lately. These are like your cosmic destiny lines. They're 2 points in the sky, and they're based on where the eclipses were happening closest to your time of birth. And so the South node is a lot like your past life energy, what you bring into this lifetime. Some astrologers say it's what you need to leave behind. I look at it differently. I look at it as a comfort zone, as this sort of sweet spot, but this place where you can stagnate if you don't stretch to the opposite end of the spectrum, which is the North node. That's your Dharma school, the new language you're here to learn. So your past life energy is in Gemini, and your destiny point, your North node, is in Sagittarius. So they're always in opposite signs, always in opposite houses. So you can there's this real journey that we go on through our lives. So you have your Gemini South node is in the 9th house, which is a lot like the Sagittarius house, because Sagittarius is the 9th sign. And then your North node in Sagittarius is in the 3rd house, which is a lot like Gemini, the 3rd sign. So it's kind of this flip for you. But those two signs deal with communication, information, how we interact with each other. So of course, you interview people with that Gemini South node, this curiosity about other people, and then wanting to turn it into the Sagittarius wisdom that makes the world a better place.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I remember like finding out about the perspective of South nodes being maybe something that you mastered in a past life, or maybe it's something, it could be even considered like something that is really easy for you in this life because it is something that, again, you mastered in a past life, which for me, when it comes to communication, I think that that's so cosmic, because that's everyone who meets me or enjoys the podcast or my clients and things like that. They're always like, you just have this gift of like, you can take these ideas and distill it down, and you're so good at communicating. And my partner, he's a Gemini sun, he's like, you're so good at communicating. Whereas like, I don't see him as like a master of communication, even though Gemini is his sun sign.
What year was he born?
Same as me, 93.
But earlier in the year. So he's a Gemini South node too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. But also there's cultural differences, right? Because I told you I moved to Spain for 6 years and I met him there. So he's Spanish. And so sometimes our communication is simply cultural and language and stuff like that. So it's interesting.
His North node in Sagittarius so brought him to and brought both of you, your North nodes in Sagittarius, into this cross-cultural, global relationship. And of course, he met while traveling. That's so funny.
So speaking of the North node kind of being this, I guess you could think of it as like a North Star, this direction that we're wanting to move in, to grow in. What would you say to someone who's looking at their North node and they're wondering, okay, like, what does this mean? What should I consider? But regardless of what sign it's in, is that like, you should work on this more, you should think about this, or do you just let it go because it's going to happen for you naturally?
Oh, no, you need to pursue it and know that it's going to feel hard for you and that you may avoid it. So I have a Cancer South node. So always worked in women's media, no problem. Women are easy, so fun, like great female friends. Homebody, love making my home beautiful, even though I'm a Sag. So I understand the Sag Cancer thing very much from that. Capricorn North node, though, because that's the opposite sign. Man, fathers, career, work. So, like I have to consciously go out and work with men, but I love to when I do, because it brings in this other perspective and dimension. And also like business has been something that I love to learn about. But the thing is, I have not worked in an office in like over 20 years. I work at home, but helping women with their businesses is like been a great expression for our Cancer Capricorn nodes, me and my sister. So, but see, you kind of use your South node as a springboard into the North node. But I mean, working with men I can't say it's always easy either. Like I used to get in fights with boys, like fist fights when I was a kid. It's a thing, Capricorn.
It's a thing. There's that fiery energy coming out. Oh my gosh, so funny. Well, you mentioned Scorpio, which I'm pretty sure my Venus is in Scorpio. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but there's this trend around dressing for your Venus sign. What do you make of that? What do you think of that? Is that accurate? Does it not really matter?
Absolutely. Dressing for your Venus sign is like Venus is the planet in your chart that will color your fashion sensibilities, but more like your taste, like what you find beautiful and seductive, which clothes and fumes, and our sensuality is gauged by Venus. Our sex energy comes from Mars, but Venus is more the seduction part and how we communicate with visual language too. So the inner planets are also really important to look at if you're especially on kind of the personal ground. So the nodes are this lofty out there big, but like just in terms of your day-to-day, the personal planets are Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, the ones that change signs pretty quickly. The Sun every 30 days, Moon every 2.5 days, Mercury 3 weeks, Venus about 4 weeks, and Mars every 6 to 8 weeks, except for when they're retrograde. But so they kind of deal with our day-to-day. You actually have Mercury and Venus in Scorpio, so do me and Ophi, which is funny. And you have Jupiter, which is one of the outer planets in Scorpio. So Mercury, part of your communication gifts come from that Mercury in Scorpio of really being able to intuitively read people. You're an empath, and actually that's your I am, which we'll get into too. But Venus and Scorpio, like I have that too. So I always have to have something with a little bit of a drop neckline or something a little sexy, a little different.
You've got like the black today, the red lipstick, like that's very Venus and Scorpio. You're doing it. You're doing it. It's so funny. I just put out a recent training and the whole thing is very Venus and Scorpio vibes because it's like dark, it's sultry, it's red, it's black, it's burgundy. And I'm like, wow, I was wondering, like, I feel so aligned with this like branding of this new offer. And it's because it's the Venus and Scorpio.
The room you're in now is very much your Virgo rising, I would say. That crisp, white, everything. But that's a rising sign also dictates our fashion sense. But if you want to really connect, like in this kind of way, look at your Venus. That's where you get like the sexy, like sex magic-y energy to your style.
Yeah, cool. I'm curious because I know that you have done readings for celebrities before, like Beyonce, Dua Lipa. When you typically read for someone like that, is there something that they are looking for counsel around? Like, how do you see these celebrities using astrology to help them in their lives or their careers?
I mean, honestly, they're just literally wondering about the same thing as the rest of us. Like, love, is it the right time to do things? There's always a little bit more of a tight-lippedness when the bit, because they have to, they have to be, but they were like, like they're, but you can tell,
Yeah, like it struck a chord, but they're not going to tell you why.
Yeah, but I think it's like any good astrologer knows that, it's like a conversation, right? Like it's just, if you have a good conversation in any reading, people will go and have a provocative thought pattern open up that they can then take into their lives. Like astrologers who tell you this is going to happen on this date exactly. It's like, yeah, it might, but I don't use astrology like that all the time. It's like, this is the energy of the day, and then you still have free will to deal with it. And, so it's sort of like with the celebrities, just like anyone else, you kind of start analyzing their chart and that other person's chart, and it turns into a really interesting discussion.
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking of like predictions and stuff of like on this day at this time, this thing is going to happen. Of course, there's still free will, so there's room for all of that to change. But you and Ophi have been really spot on with a lot of your predictions that you've made, especially as it relates to things like celebrities and pop culture. Some of your 2024 predictions were crazy. I mean, when they sent them to me, I was like, that's wild. You guys predicted that there would be an assassination attempt on a world leader, that there was going to be a Bennifer breakup, right? Ben and Jennifer no longer.
And then a Bieber baby as well.
Yep, that there was going to be a baby for the Biebers, that injection drugs would become a new cure-all. We saw that with Ozempic. Like, there was a lot. So yeah, like tap into some like pop culture predictions or anything that you guys are sensing or feeling from the stars in terms of what might be in store for us for 2025.
Yeah, I mean, the cozy couple is going to be the new it couple. Jupiter's going into Cancer. So on the celebrity front, like Benny Blanco and Selena Gomez, she's a Cancer, he's a Pisces. Tom Holland and Zendaya, we see a baby for them this year actually coming, yeah, and which would be adorable, right? And Callie Uchis and Don Toliver may have a reality show, or be the Gen Z family couple, just there's a movement. So next year is really pretty crazy. We're calling it the year of the divine pendulum, this 2025, because all the planets, all the outer planets, so those inner planets that I just talked about are my day-to-day, but the outer planets shape global trends and shifts. Every single one of them is going to be either moving into another sign next year or previewing, another sign for a little while that it moves into in 2026. And they're all moving away from these softer signs like Taurus, Pisces, or even Capricorn, these more traditional earth signs, and into these very heady, renegade, aggressive signs. Aries, Gemini, Aquarius. And we ain't seen nothing yet with AI, really. I think celebrities are going to be trading NFTs again, and that's good. The NFT market's going to open up with that. Unfortunately, more war. Where we're going, a lot of these outer planets haven't, Neptune is moving into Aries. The last time it was there was at the start of the Civil War. Other things are different this time, but Pluto is in Aquarius. The last time it was there was when it was the end of the Revolutionary War, and then we got the Constitution. Neptune in Aries was the beginning, but also the end of the Civil War and then abolition. So we have Uranus moving into Gemini for the first time since 1941 to 49. That was World War II was underway. It ended, and then we had all these new alliances that came. So it's a bumpy entry, and now we have Trump as the president. So that's already whoa, what is that going to do for immigration? We're getting a lot of reality checks that we're going to have to use in new ways for next year. It's what needs to be done is much more grassroots, personal, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, are going to become a lot more focused there. And so it's less exciting, but also I think people are just going to be wanting to find their communities more than ever next year.
Well, I know that you guys had hinted at sort of predicting the Trump election, not that it was what you wanted, but that for whatever reason, astrologically, you felt that might be the direction that this election was going to take.
I know people kept asking us, who do you think is going to win? And it's look, I mean, it's no secret. I've worked in feminist media. I'm a woman, modern woman. I did not want him to. I'm granddaughter of immigrants. I did not want him to win. But when I looked, I was I was maybe manifestational work, but his chart was so much better, unfortunately, from my perspective, than Kamala's. This man is his luck is just freaking insane in his lifetime. So Jupiter, the planet of luck, good fortune, moved into his sign in May of this year. And shortly after, the Supreme Court basically gave him this new level of immunity. And then his sun is at 20 degrees Gemini. Jupiter hit 20 degrees Gemini on election day. It was literally the luckiest planet was in the same place as the sun.
I have my little Jupiter tattoo. You can barely see it because it's so faded, but I have a little Jupiter there.
I have one too.
Oh my God. In the same spot. You're joking.
I wanted mine to be little, and it got so big that they made it, of course, mine, I was wait, that was not the right size, but I picked the size, so I had it all decorated. That's crazy. Same birthday tattoo.
Because it is. It's the planet of luck, right? Okay, so that was on his
sun, his Gemini sun.
On the day of the election. Wow.
And the United States, we looked at the United States birth chart, giving July 4th, 1776. So Chiron, I don't know if your listeners know much about Chiron, but it's this asteroid, the wounded healer. It's an asteroid that sits between restrictive Saturn and liberated Uranus. So it kind of shows this core wound that we have to evolve from. So the United States was having this exact Chiron return, meaning Chiron had returned to the same degree of Aries where it was when the US was established. So we are going through this like identity crisis now. This is like the wound is like exposed, like, you know, there's still fear and racism and sexism on a level that maybe we didn't know until we saw this popular vote. And I was like, oh my God, all these people, like the way the votes were divided along racial lines kind of supports that, you know? So
you were disappointed but not surprised, I guess we could say.
yeah, heartbroken, devastated, but not surprised.
How does this all align with, I think 2025 is meant to be a year 9 in numerology, right? When I found that out, I was like, I'm not really happy about that, because I don't know why, like year 9s for me, I'm like, oh God, it's like the death and rebirth. It's like the endings. It's like,
it is. It's so weird. That's why we're calling it the divine pendulum, because it's like, oh, new Aries, Gemini, Aquarius, and then Jupiter goes into Cancer in the second half of the year, which is good for women for sure. But this 9-year, and then the North Node goes into Pisces on January 11th. I'm glad about that because it's been in Aries since the middle of 2023, the sign of war. And so, I mean, we've been in a dragon year, which is also an Aries energy. This year, next year on January 29th, we start the year of the wood snake, which is more like Taurus energy, and wood is about growth. But I do think there'll be this sense of just next year, like, where am I? Like, almost like Toto, like you're half in and out of the matrix a little bit as you prepare for 2026, which is, it's funny because a lot of people are probably feeling post-election like just giving up, you know, a little bit on the left. But there's like a real momentum that happened from Kamala Harris and just like the conversations that erupted around everything. So
yeah, I mean, maybe it's my Sag, but I am like truly the eternal optimist. And I think that we're going to be okay no matter what. And I felt that going in really confidently, you know, not wanting my power to be taken away by any one person or any one vote, but really just trusting that whatever happens, like we're going to be okay. And I think that's at this stage, like that's the only outlook that we can have for the future, is an understanding that now, okay, what does this mean for us? You know, what do we get to place more importance on in our lives? Where do we want to create waves or uplift voices or, you know, build movements and things like that? So I think ultimately it's going to bring people together. And I do hope that 2025 ends up being a year of, we've been in this like great awakening, you know, era for like a little while now when everyone talks about the age of Aquarius. But I think it's a blessing to be alive at such a time in the world where there is so much awakening and there is so much change. And it's almost like, of course, there's going to be a lot of friction before there's a rebirth of something, before there's a lot of change.
Yeah, I think we've got more of that coming. The fact that this happened for many light workers and change makers is a big wake-up call, too. It's like, all right, what's going on with the people that did vote for Trump? Or what is the fear that they have? But it is going to be scary for women and undocumented immigrants and a lot of people who are just, you know, but I also, as an eternal optimistic Sag, do think that, like, I don't know, like we have to come up with some real ways of creating protections. And, you know, just like the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was the Constitution came to us in 1781. We got the US dollar, like a lot of things. So I don't think we've actually seen the revolution yet, you know? So
we could be on the cusp.
Yeah, maybe the revolution is supposed to come from the real change makers. I mean, I think the people in MAGA think that they're making change by making America great again. But there's like let's go back to this version of America that didn't exist. And that was very Pluto and Capricorn. Like, this is daddy. He is stable, you know? And now it's like, no, it's going to take us a little while to, like, I think the word for next year is curiosity. Because, like, rage could come up very easily, but what Gemini energy, that Uranus and Gemini, Jupiter and Gemini is like, let's get curious about what does change actually look like. Because a lot of people feel like, well, we've had, you know, Obama, we've had Democrats, and still my life as on the, margins outside of big cities has not changed, except things have gotten more expensive. So this just, anyways, those are the things that 2025 are going to be about, like really going into those like agonizing things that we hate to look at, but that we have to.
Yeah, the curiosity in order to push forward with transformation. Outside of, the political climate, is there anything for us to look forward to in 2025? Do you see anything where it's like, oh, that could be a nice moment, that could be a fun placement, that could be a cool transit? Like, is there anything that we can get excited about?
Definitely. We have eclipses happening in Pisces and Virgo that are going to bring some nice like a push towards self-care, and like the wellness world is going to see some really nice advances. We're going like fashion is going to become really interesting in terms of just like the integration of technology with that. I do think space travel is going to take an electric vehicle, so it's going to come into new incarnations and become more accessible. Relationships are going to get kind of interesting. I feel like people are really wanting to go deeper, like a new level of empathy and emotional intelligence is going to come through with that North Node in Pisces and also Jupiter in Cancer. So this is where I feel a little hope, like that like right now we got the North Node in Aries, so we're learning how to fight. But the North Node in Pisces is learning how to be compassionate. Also learning like the South Node in Virgo, the environment, North Node in Pisces. Like it sounds maybe not very enticing, but like in some ways we have to make some sacrifices to some of our lifestyle habits in order for the climate to not completely destroy us. So I mean, we just can't keep going on at these levels, but like I do see a restructuring in some ways of people's ethics and values to become more green and climate conscious. A lot more close-knit relationships as well once Jupiter goes into Cancer in June 9th, like friends buying land together, friends buying buildings or setting up co-ops and things together.
I love that. Yeah, can you explain what Jupiter is going to do for Cancer? Because Jupiter is like an amplifier, right?
Amplifier, it is an expander. So Jupiter's in Gemini now, and it's interesting. It's putting that spotlight on our neighbors. What is going on here? What do we need to talk about? Jupiter is not happy in Gemini because that's the opposite sign of its home of Sag, but every planet has a position called exalted, meaning it's its most powerful place, and it's exalted in Cancer. Weirdly enough, Jupiter the traveler is happiest in Cancer, the most empathic sign. So I just think emotional intelligence, learning about feelings. The residential real estate market could go through some interesting iterations with Jupiter there. So,
ooh, like in a good way.
Yeah, like people might be able to buy a house. Maybe there'll be like a
breaking news. You might be able to buy a house, millennials. You might be able to buy a house.
That wealth transfer from boomers to millennials is probably going to start happening of houses. Yeah.
And then because Cancer is like associated with like the mother archetype and this like nurturing energy, is there anything there that you would say when Jupiter moves into the sign of Cancer?
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, in terms of just freedom, Jupiter's also about freedom. I think maybe for reproductive rights, even though Scorpio is more the sign of reproduction, like choosing whether or not you want to be a parent, the conversation about choice it's already going to be a big deal, but I think it's weird saying it, but shrinking populations, they're happening, there are many more older people than there are younger people, and there's countries that are actually having it. It's like creating a shortage of people to care for the elderly and, so the cycle of it is, so I think there might be some weird because it just feels like that, but like these incentives to have children and like a little bit like trad mom stuff coming in.
Okay. More of like the trad wife, trad mom movement.
Family. I mean, some really interesting like equality laws around family were signed into law, like Loving versus Virginia when Jupiter was in Cancer, which legalized interracial marriages. And in 2013, gay marriages became legal under Jupiter in Cancer. So I think that we may actually see family being redefined in a more modern way in the second half of the year, or a push for that, in spite of the fact that we have this red wave. It's like, it's hard to imagine with the current, like, you know, news that we're all taking in about Republicans.
I wonder what it will mean. Yeah, because certainly, you know, I think Republicans hold a lot of family values. So depending, obviously they're very different, but I wonder if there's something that has to do with family.
Just in terms of the who gets to be defined as a family with so many divorces and splits and things, like there may have to be like provisions for non-traditional families that come up. And maybe it's not going to happen in the United States, but it might help happen in other places. So
interesting. Speaking of families and motherhood stuff, this is like a journey that I've been on. I would say this whole year, we've talked about it on the podcast a lot. I have this question in my mind of when I'm going to be ready to move into that stage of motherhood. And I know for sure that I want to have children. And I think I feel that mother, like nurturing energy from my Cancer moon for sure. And I've had so many like cosmic experiences. I went on a pilgrimage in Egypt this year and I had so many visions and things about having children. I just had a really random tarot reading where they were like, you're going to have 3 kids and it's happening in 2026. And I was like, wow, that's weirdly accurate. But all of this to say, when you look at astrology charts, is there any like placement or anything that you would look at to really see when motherhood or like family stuff comes into someone's life? Or is that not something you can see?
The 5th house is a big one. So your 5th house begins with 3 degrees of Aquarius, where Pluto will be moving by 2026. So you are getting close to it, maybe not moving into it. But yeah, I think that just the transition towards it is starting to show up. But with your 14-degree Cancer moon, I would say 2026 in the early part of the year too, even the end of 2025, because Jupiter is going to be amplifying that.
Okay, well, let's get ready, fam. We better saddle up and get ready for that. Wow. Okay, so maybe sooner than we thought. I love that. I really wanted to talk to you about the I AM archetypes because I read mine in your book, and I immediately, when I read it, I was like, wow, us personal development junkies, you know, we love all these things. We love the personality types. We love to be able to see ourselves in new ways. And so it's not surprising that, of course, you know, astrology is something that's resonated with me for a long time. So if this is based on placements in my chart, it makes sense that this archetype then would resonate. But even so, you know, when we read new things like this, we're like, wow, how did you know that's so me? So I think this is a really cool, you know, for all of my listeners who love this kind of stuff and you want to take another quiz to find out, you know, another iteration of how you can see yourself and how you're expressed in the world. This is truly fascinating and I've loved getting to learn about mine. So let's talk about the I AM archetypes and where they came from and how we can use them.
Absolutely. Well, the good news is it's only a quiz that you have to put your birthday in, not answer a bunch of questions, because it is based on your birth chart, but we call it a quiz, yes. And that is accurate. What it does is use what's called chart dominance, the dominant elements, the dominant modalities. So the I AM system works out this. Most people know you divide your chart up as fire, earth, air, and water. Each zodiac sign has that a trait associated with it. We're fire signs, the Sagittarius. But there's a second division called the modalities, the qualities that are really powerful and don't get as much airtime. So we have the cardinal signs, the fixed signs, and the mutable signs. And we gave them fun new names. The cardinals are the innovator signs, the fixed signs are the authority signs, and the mutable signs are the mavens. So it just feels like it has more meaning to it. And what we do is we take 13 points in your chart. Like we just talked extensively about astrology, and there'll be people listening like, That's cool. What does that mean anyways? This is for people who can be astrology for non-astrologers or people who just want the short code of it. Because I use this all the time and I know my chart inside out. So what it does is it takes 13 points, the sun, moon, rising, all the planets, and then the nodes. So if you don't know your time of birth, might be off by 1 or 2, but it's still, you can still totally use this. And then it gives you this primary archetype. So if you're an innovator, your chart is mostly cardinal signs. Those are the signs that start every season. Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, which in your chart, 3 of your 13 are, so that's your lowest one. These are the people who are like the trailblazers, the pioneers. They're going to go far ahead and like do things like they're all, maybe drive people crazy a little bit and people don't get what they're doing until later. I'm an innovator and I may resemble that remark. The the authorities in the I AM system are the fixed signs of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. These are the signs in the middle of each season. So they kind of hold things down. It's like, okay, and the authorities, which you are 5 of, you're split 5. So you're 3 innovator, 5 authority, 5 maven. So you're one of our hybrids. But that authority is the planner, the executor, the manager, the ones who makes sure stuff gets done and make sure everyone's set up and handled. I mean, they just know. I love authorities because they always know the best solution.
I love that the podcast name is Makeshift Happen.
Exactly.
It's right. That's a very authority name.
It is. And the fact that it's a podcast is the maven part, because the maven signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, the mutable signs. These are the communicators, the messengers, the ones who want to like share all the information and have guests and do that. So with the authority maven, it's like, that's a really like powerful communicator profile to have. And because we also calculate, we have the simple I am calculator, we have one called the I am diagram calculator. It's in the book that you can also do your elements. So you're 3 fire, 3 earth, 2 air, and 5 water. So you're a water authority maven, which we call the empath.
Okay, that's where the empath part comes in. Yeah, my assistant is also, she practices astrology. So I was talking to her this morning before we jumped on to record. And I'm like, Lori, pull up my chart really quick. I don't know my dominant elements. And so we were talking about that. And I was actually surprised that water was I knew that I was mainly, I thought I was mainly fire and water. But yeah, I didn't know that water was so dominant in my chart. But Lori had said to me, I probably feel quite dominant in fire because it's in those, I have it in my big 3 versus some of the other things are like in the outer planets.
But when it comes to your I am, like, this is like your leading, like if we were to put your entire chart in a blender, that's what we come up with. It's like, can we reduce your chart? That's what we were upset, like, because everyone's like, what's the most important thing? Should I use my Venus? Well, what if we could just like squeeze it all into one thing so that you could, me and Ophi are water innovators, the tide turner. And that's just like so fits us because we love to do new things, but it always comes from this very like feeling into what people need place. Someone's just like, no, let's do it this way, but in this sort of gentle way. And you probably have a very like gentle hand, but you make sure that stuff gets done, right?
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. I love that idea of like, because I think a lot of people want to know more about their astrology, but it is so complex and there's so many pieces and parts of the chart that, it feels like it's not a full picture if you just know your sun sign or even if you just know your big 3. So what I love about these archetypes is that it is exactly that. It takes the whole chart, puts it into a blender, and then distills it down into this archetype that you can learn about and really understand. How would you recommend that people use this in their life? Like, what is the practical application of understanding these things?
Oh, well, yourself? That's why we wrote the book, for exactly that reason too. Like, our whole mission with astrology is to help people, use their charts, use astrology to plan and make decisions so we can all live lives that we love or come as close to it as we possibly can. So, of course, there's the quiz right at the beginning of the book, but then we get right into every single area of life that we could put into a book. You know, there's like a whole section on compatibility in relationships. There's workplace, because honestly, this is a productivity and optimization. It's a life optimizer, like how you schedule your time, how you set up your space. Like your room that you're in right now is very authority, you know, simple, neat, clean, everything, you know, and it's like the way people even arrange, you know, or plan families or raise kids or ask for a raise or go on a date. Like we get into the nooks and crannies of that in the book. And we want people to be able to do those optimizing things for their, you know, with their whole chart, not just their sun sign.
Yeah, I love that so much. I can't wait to read more of those in-depth pieces of my archetype because like I said, I really resonated when I read mine. I'm really excited to look into how I can better optimize the way that I schedule my life and how I do things and set up my spaces and spend my time, and even things like in relationships and stuff, which you kind of touched on, the compatibility thing, which I know is always a hot topic when it comes to astrology because everyone loves to do those little tests of, you know, does my sign match with his sign? Or
that's how I got obsessed with astrology.
Oh, is it really?
Of course, you know.
I feel like that was such a thing. Like I remember when I was younger in magazines, like 17 magazine, or like it was such a thing to like go through and like see your little horoscope or like the compatibility of you and the boy that you liked or something like that.
It says Libras are going to get a kiss on the 13th. Oh, I love a Libra. Yeah, I know. I mean, that really did. I did try to plan my first kiss with my Libra first boyfriend around a YM magazine and horoscope. So
wow. Okay, so we're taking it full circle. This is funny. What is your perspective now on the concept of like compatibility as it relates to astrology signs?
My opinion is that any two signs or any two I ams can make it work. Relationship is the ultimate classroom. No relationship is going to be perfect, and anyone who wants to be in a relationship should be ready to roll up their sleeves at some point, because after the we have so much in common phase ends, the differences and the unhealed parts of ourselves come out to play, and that's where astrology is the best tool ever. So there's a whole communication section that you can use for any part of your life. Like innovators communicate and like they love to talk about big ideas, but hate to be like pinned down. Like, when are we going to do this? You know, whereas authorities want to wax nostalgic about the past and put plans and calendars. And mavens are just like so caught up in the moment. They're like, oh my God, squirrel, shiny thing. And then like, I have a lot of maven friends for some reason. And probably because I'm a Sag and unmutable. And like when the Sag part kicks in after work, I'm like, I want to be with someone who's like chatty and talky and mavens are like so, but sometimes I have to be like, whoa, give me a minute. Remember not to like, they're just talking. They're not trying to, they don't need a business plan, like business idea, because they said they like, you know, cupcakes or something.
Right. Like you don't need to put plans to what they're talking about. You're trying to like manage how you approach things versus like how they approach things. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, and that's just key in general in relationships, not trying to apply your way, your worldview or your way of thinking. I mean, I think so many women experience that because there's a conversation all the time of like, if you're in a heterosexual relationship, of being the woman and feeling like, I just want to tell you about the shitty things that happened today. I don't want you to fix it. Like, please don't give me a plan. Please don't try to solve it. And so it's that, right? There's always like this balance of like matching and knowing that your energy is different from someone else's and not needing to apply the way that you would approach things to them.
Exactly what that Pisces North node that I alluded to earlier is going to be helping us with, and Jupiter in Cancer, as well as Jupiter in Gemini. Part of the reason why I think we are at this emotional civil war that we're in already is like nobody is listening. No one is mirroring anyone. We're at this place in humanity where like there's some core underlying commonality that we all have as to why we made our voting decisions. Probably fear, you know, for many people, because the world feels very out of control on some levels. I mean, of course, there's always something beautiful and joyful to find. I'm not trying to sound like super apocalyptic, but we are in these, you know, it's like we've got war, climate change. I think just like drilling down to the why did you do that is without
trying to force the way that we see things on other people, but actually listening or becoming curious. Like you said, curiosity, becoming curious about the way that other people see things so that we can actually listen and maybe understand something and actually hear each other. Yeah, I definitely feel that there's no listening, there's no mutual understanding, there's no interest in actually even trying to attempt to understand someone else's view.
Yeah, and it's gotten us into such a place. And it's also compounded by the fact that many people's views have been suppressed and silenced for so long that it's like, well, why should I listen to yours? I already know it, It's everywhere I turn. So, I don't have that fully fleshed out yet, but I do think like a new level of, I don't know, like maybe it won't happen in government or in the powers that are currently like, or the autocratic spaces, but in our personal spaces, which matter just as much in our life experience.
Absolutely. So I think that's kind of the theme for moving forward in 2025 is that curiosity, transmuting things, like hearing each other, turning the page.
Being willing to like let go of things that have been comfort. That's a 9-year. It's not going to be, this easiest year for sure. But I do think there's progress that will happen in places that we don't expect it to.
Yeah. Well, that feels hopeful. What do you think in terms of, because I always have this like I said before, I have this like, oh God, it's a year 9. What are the positive sides of a year 9? What are the good parts? Because I feel like I've fear-mongered myself into being like, it's a year.
9 is the most spiritual number, and it's also very sacred. So it's a great year for self-care, great year for exploring like spirituality, your inner landscape, preparing, like, okay, if you're preparing to become a mom, whether you do it in 2026 or not, like, I think like 9 years are a time for really honor, and as an authority, like honoring the past, nostalgia, finding ways to do the work but also to care for ourselves. It's a little slower. This was an 8-year. An 8-year, our numerologist, Felicia Bender, who writes for our site, she always says 8-9-1 is this transition that's tough. Like the 8 years, like all of a sudden it's like, that is the year of the autocrat, the 9 years much more spiritual. And then the 1 year is like whole new cycle. But I think in the 9 year, it's like really taking time to be grateful, appreciative.
Like going inward? Is it like an inner world year?
Definitely an inner world. Inner world, but not hiding out. Like that's the thing. It's like inner world, but then you have Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, and Jupiter. It's like, but not so far in that you get lost.
Okay, the Aries thing, and with like inner world mixed with fire signs, I'm like, is it shadow work? Should we be doing our shadow work?
I wouldn't call it shadow work, though. It's forgiveness work.
Yeah, you mentioned letting go. Like it feels like we're making peace with something.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a divine acceptance. Like, okay, this is happening for a reason, but why? And then really being on an inquiry and being willing to say, what do I need to maybe shift in my life? Do I need to move to a different place that's friendlier to me? Do I need to change my attitude about the way I talk to this group of people? And where do I actually need boundaries too to protect myself? Because of course there are some really, there's some people trying to take rights away. So that's not okay. And so I think that Neptune and Aries, and I think there will be more fights there's the Civil War energy, whether it's not going to be fought with bayonets. There are some people who will require force, I guess you could say, or law. So it's very paradoxical year, a swinging pendulum back and forth, living in both of those, the new and the nostalgic. Yeah.
Oh, the new and the nostalgic. I love that. We're going to make the most of it. I know that for sure.
We are, because we're Sages, and that's what we do.
That's right. We're going to make the most of it. All right, you guys. Well, this has been so much fun. I'm excited for 2025. As always, I've got my eternal optimism hat on, as I do at the start of every year. So I'm excited to go into my inner world and figure out the things that I need to let go of. Look at the hard lessons that are happening in life, family, relationships, politics, all the areas. Why is this happening? Okay, let me get curious. Can I listen to people more? Can I learn more perspectives? is, what do I need to fight for? What do I actually really care about that I want to pursue and that I want to amplify voices around? So I think this is going to be a powerful year for all of us, and I'm really excited. If you guys want to check out your I AM Archetypes, make sure that you grab the book, The Astrology Advantage. We will link it in the show notes for you. I can't wait to dive deeper into mine and start making some adjustments to my life so that I can live more in alignment in accordance to my astrology with this super easy system. So thank you so much, Tali, for coming on and chatting all things astrology with us. I always love these conversations. Can you let everyone know where they can connect with you and Ophi the best?
Yes. Instagram at AstroTwins is always a good place to find us. And our website, AstroStyle or AstroTwins.com, you can get there that way too, has everything like dailies, weeklies, monthlies. You can do free birth charts. You can read all about in depth the transits that are happening, the planets in your chart, astrology news. And yeah, you can get lost in a reading rabbit hole there. Oh, and of course, every year we write a big book that maps out the entire year for every sign. So our 2025 horoscope book is on sale now. We've got some great holiday gift deals going on, and it basically is your friend for the whole year. It has your in-depth horoscope for your sign, life, love, career, money, and then every single day that there's an important transit happening is all written out. You could get our big book that is all 12 signs, and we have done 12 smaller planner books that actually have calendar pages in them. So if you want to like map out, if you're an authority, for example, you can map out all your days that way. So that's also at astrostyle.com or on our Instagram, and people just love it and say it's like their go-to. We'll make sure you get one too for the year ahead.
Yay! Okay, amazing. I love that so much, being able to see the year in accordance to your astrology. So we will link that for you guys as well. All right, you guys, go check everything out. We'll link it all in the show notes for you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, if you want to send it to a friend or it made you think of someone who you know loves living in accordance to the stars or is just learning more about astrology, copy the link, send it to a friend, let them know you were thinking of them, and we will see you guys next week. Bye!